Hello, sisters. Okay, so chapter 12. Oh, this is not chapter 12. Oh no, we read chapter 12. We're in chapter 13. Okay. How are you guys doing today? Um, I had work this morning. I think my work in the afternoon is canceled. I emailed them. We'll see. So I could be streaming for like 5 hours today. I think if I am gonna stream for a super long time though, like I don't know, I'm conflicted because on one hand I want to get through this book because it's annoying me and I want to finish it, and we are like that far through the book. And on the other hand, I think I might get sick of this. I want to do a Benji's Matchbox. There's an extra article about how it's so difficult for trans men in Canada to get top surgery. Like I didn't read the article because I like to have fresh reactions on the channel, but I'm definitely gonna do a Benji's Matchbox about it. Whether it's today or Friday, I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let's get going. Okay. December passed in an uneasy blur. For Christmas, Anna and I split town and went to Paris. God, it was dark. It was dark when we got up, dark when we went to bed in that apartment we borrowed from one of Anna's friends. It was partly jet lag, partly the medieval sun deprived streets, mostly the endless rain. How it rained in Paris. Then rained some more. And after that, it stormed. We'd eat breakfast in the afternoon, then venture outside in the streets where the sky was black and the dark pavement streaked with water, through puddles reflected lights, though puddles reflected lights from the street lights and headlamps and the yellow, steaming windows of bistros. I suppose there were holiday lights too, but we couldn't see them from underneath our umbrellas. I'm pretty sure she lives in Paris right now. I might be wrong though. You can look it up. But I'm pretty sure she lives in France. Okay. Again, I wish she would tell us what year this is. Let me like scan back a little bit in this chapter and look for a year. I'm guessing this is like 1995-ish, but we haven't had any landmarks to base that on in a long time, so I have no idea. Okay. With sopping feet, we went to cafes and galleries and museums. I tried to find some key to enter the place, some crack to sneak through. In high school, I'd been routed to Spanish. Only snobs took French. The knee jerk prejudice had stuck, even if I loved Marcel Duchamp and had a thing for Gertrude Stein, who had a thing for the City of Light. I tried to chill out. France was Anna's second home, the place she'd lived after Cuba, where I'd probably never go and didn't particularly want to. I know a little bit about pottery, anyway. At the Louvre, I drug Anna to the Islamic art wing and showed her azulejos. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. Tiles. With the same abstract designs they had all over Spain. It was a legacy from successive conquering Arab waves that I'd learned about in high school. I didn't think of them yet as Muslims, but as Arab and Mozarab. I'd taken ceramic in college and babbled to Anna about the composition of glazes and clays. When I had to piss, I discovered my French was as good as hers if I ignored everything people said and just followed their pointing fingers. Go straight, then take a right, then you'll find the bathroom. We went to the Picasso Museum. He was familiar too. That balding, laughing man photographed on the beach. The earnest, almond eyed boy. I stared a long time at the sketches from Guernica. War seemed distant, but the agony and violence real, embodied in that lopped off arm holding a sword, the wild eyed horse. Anna showed me all the places she lived and worked and studied, mapping the city with her life. From the movie theater where she got tickets to the place she lived during May 68, which she had to explain. How students and workers rose up, went to the Degoy, fleeing to Germany, while the cops sent protesters fleeing over garden walls. I still couldn't overcome my aversion to what I thought was France. All that dark, monumental stone, the blackness of ages, narrow, suffocating streets, the horror of the Luxembourg Gardens where trees were manicured into careful mathematical shapes. Across the river in Tuileries, I don't know how to say that. The arch lined up with the pyramid lined with the other arch and an obelisk. No wonder Duchamp had evolved here, inserting tendrils of ridiculousness to break apart the grey stone. Give me Dada instead of the Enlightenment any day, I thought. Give me bicycle tires and broken nudes. No wonder the students had risen up. And before that, the sans-culottes. My God, I missed the wilderness of New York, but tried not to show it. Okay, so maybe I told Anna a little of what I felt. Maybe after a couple days of gray stones and tidied gardens, I ranted and raved and threw myself on the slippery cobblestones and foamed at the mouth. Until we went to that demo. America had its David Duke, France had its Jean Marie Le Pen, lawyer, legislator, anti Semitic, anti immigrant, Holocaust denier, ex foreign legionnaire, and maybe a torturer. Great. He was rallying. His rallying cry was France for the French and traditional values. Some lefty group was holding a protest against the racism he incited. Anna and I picked up a tube of white acrylic paint, a brush, and dry black umbrellas. Riding the metro, I painted a bomb in the center and lettered in French around it lesbian Avengers. Les justicières lesbiennes. Against racism. It was the first thing that made me really happy in France, painting that umbrella on the subway while the riders looked on. At the demo, one or two nodded in acknowledgement, but nobody said anything. They're polite, those French people. So discreet. Go to something about racism in New York, it's mostly people of color with a few whites tossed in. In Paris, there were black people, Asians, North Africans, plenty of whites, all speaking French like they owned the language, and I realized, like Le Pen, I'd thought of France as a white place, though it hadn't been since the Gauls painted their faces blue and greased their hair. It rained, of course. I held the umbrella high. Afterwards, Anna took pity on me and booked two places to the Côte d'Azur, which was my first trip ever on a real train, if you don't count those commuter things to Philly. There were bunk beds, like in the movies, porters. Heading south, we shot through the damp countryside, arriving in Nice around dark. Greeted by an enormous and terrifying dog, we slept that night in a small hotel, with thick moldy curtains and the sound of waves crashing on an invisible beach. When we woke in the morning, Anna pulled open the windows, we were blinded with the light, and ran outside like two mental patients. What an incredible and strange blue the sky was. What a strange green the sea. They were the colors of Métis, colors I thought were made up. How come no one had told me? Anna laughed when I grabbed her hand and didn't let go. We moved to a hotel on the Promenade des Anglais that had a cut rate Christmas special. Our new room had a balcony overlooking the bay and a minibar, which I'd never seen before. Wait, didn't she mention a year? Oh no, that was just the 68 riots. For fuck's sake, I really wish she would tell us what year we're talking about. Okay. Like we can't look up I probably can't look up this um like she mentioned this specific rally by this what's his name? Jean-Marie Le Pen. Um but we probably can't look it up because it's very generic. She doesn't give us any specific information to figure out when that was. I just keep looking for things that will tell us what year it fucking is. I don't know. Oh, sorry, I'll keep moving on. Hello, Blood Moon. Okay. Um, below, there was there was a fisherman among the enormous rocks at the crook of the bay. The waves would hit him and the spray would shoot up 15 feet. A couple of people actually swam. There were others in chairs on the beach, made only by pebbles, which I'd never seen before either. We went down and slid around on the stones. Later, we walked up the beach to a park where they had all these strange desert plants. Some had the smooth, thick leaves of aloe, others were cactusy and prickly. We stumbled over an old cemetery up there filled with Americans who'd come from Cincinnati when it was an important center of American culture, and San Francisco, just a dirty little port town. There were worse places to die, I thought. Later, we found an enormous eternal market with 50 stalls, selling masses of cut flowers, and dozens others with olives that were flavored with orange or garlic or burning peppers. At an outdoor restaurant, we ate soup au pistou, which was which was full of vegetables and no meat. I could understand some of the French because they pronounced it more like Italian or Spanish. They also had their own Ni- Nisard dialect, which had outlasted the Genoese, Saracens, Sardinians, even the French kings. I decided it was small minded of me to despise a whole country and told Anna I wouldn't mind retiring there. She laughed, but I meant it, imagining a tiny room with a balcony, staring out at the sea and the sky. Reassured by my reassured by my insignificance and yours. Christmas Eve, we went to the fancy shopping street and bought a bottle of champagne and a little Cuban cigar, which I smoked, pretending to be Janet Flanner, chatting with Gertrude Stein about her latest article in the New Yorker. At a bakery with an enormous line, we got a bûche de Noël, a Christmas cake in the shape of a log and decorated with funny meringue mushrooms and a little sleigh. We took it all back to the hotel where the champagne went into the little minibar, and we squabbled over the mushrooms on the bûche because I had picked up some intestinal bug. Wasn't it kind and generous of Anna to offer to eat them all so I wouldn't have to? and that and near midnight, we walked back into the town where the cathedral was having a mass. It was too packed to go in, but you could hear the chants and carols in the square. Afterwards, at the hotel, I stood on the balcony for a long time, listening to the waves crashing against the rocks and trying to make out the line between the black sea and the black sky. Paris was okay after that, even if I was on a diet of Imodium. We got a dry day and saw other parts of the city where the architect Haussmann hadn't left his stamp. Montmartre was still villagey with steep, winding streets and little human sized buildings. In a different neighborhood, we found African bazaars, Moroccan souks, with working class people, immigrants. We went to the Gobelin Tapestry Factory and to the catacombs of Denfert Rochereau, where underground avenues were laid out in more straight lines, with bones neatly stacked along the walls, mingling together millions of exhumed Parisians, tibias crossed over each other, skulls aligned. I got the idea that the obsessive order of the formal French gardens must have been a sophisticated joke. A day or two before we left, Anna's brother came up from Loire Valley where he lives. They had a coffee at the cafe downstairs. He stuck his head in. I didn't do much but say hello before I had to go puke. Afterwards, Anna went to the pharmacy and described all my horrifying symptoms and came back with a bunch of drugs the pharmacist gave her, just like that. I was sad to go. The place grows on you, like a fungus maybe. At the airport, I confessed France wasn't so bad. I wouldn't mind coming back. We could stay for a year. Why not? Anna brought chocolate truffles. On the plane, I'd stretched out on two empty seats and slept. Okay, that's the end of chapter 13. Um, sorry, I just wanna. Sorry, I'm just a bit chilly. Wanted to get slippers. I'm guessing that France is significant in this book or in her life because she spent the whole fucking chapter talking just about France, right? Chapter 14. Back in New York, I scrambled to pick up some cash to pay back Anna for our trip to Paris. I wasn't much good at it. I bussed for Catherine sometimes when she worked the room upstairs at the restaurant, even though I was a total jinx for business, and all I did was refill two or three water glasses. I also cocktail waitressed a couple of times at Crazy Nanny's, where one Avenger bartended on the top floor and another was go-go dancing. Later, I stuffed envelopes for Jennifer Monson about some dance thing and for Eileen Miles about a poetry event, and typed a manuscript by Abe, this old ex-boxer guy who was sleeping with my former Bengali roommate. It was full of Rocky like stories of pounding meat carcasses and old brick walls and bloody sagas of the murderous Jewish mob, which he swore were true, and a love interest in the form of an Indian princess, not South Asian at all, but Native American. I charged too much, but he didn't care. It was going to be a bestseller. And almost every Tuesday, I was still off to the Avengers, who were in a state of perpetual fury at our new mayor, Rudolph Giuliani. Okay. Who had messed up ideas about law and order. As a candidate, he joined this enormous mob of rioting cops protesting Dinkins' plan to improve the Civilian Complaint Review Board. And as mayor, he quickly unleashed the Street Crimes Unit, which seemed largely to serve for harassing African American and Latino kids and nailing squeegee men who swilled dirty water on car windows to scrounge a few tips. It was a war zone around Tompkins Square Park, with banners hanging from windows, and cops in riot gear dragging away skinny white kids with dreads from the decaying squats. They shouted "Power to the People" and other retro slogans. If two activists got together over beer, they'd spit and curse Antonio Pagan, this gay Latino council member who used to be all about low income housing and queer rights, but had decided it was time to let the developers in. Besides the squatters under attack, you'd see clubs and bars shuttered for breaking obscure laws, and fences would appear overnight around public parks that would then get locked after dark, so there was nowhere free to sit. On the west side, where Anna and I had our first kiss, the crumbling piers were posted with warnings and barred off. Fags and drag queens were the casualties of plans to turn the place into a nice waterside park for the pricey neighbors. Only money talked. Giuliani dumped the liaison to the LGBT community, slashed AIDS funding and the budget for housing works, and installed notorious rainbow curriculum foe Ninfa Sagara not only as head of the Department of Education but also of Health and Human Services, which meant the woman who told New York Magazine that the rainbow curriculum made her want to throw up could torture queers from preschools straight to the grave, controlling half the city's multi-billion-dollar budget. I just want to quickly mention in this book, she literally calls gay men fags, and it's fine because this is a normal thing. Like, I don't want to get off topic, but with the whole thing, how Curtis Tripp is like screaming that everyone is homophobic, like, I think one lesbian called him a fag one time. And like, I've hung out with older lesbians, and they literally like will see a gay guy they know on the street and be like, "Yo, what's up?" And like in conversation with the gay guy, like refer to him as a fag, and everybody's like, "Yeah." So like nobody cares, like it's normal. I've also come across gay men calling lesbians dyke, like usually much older, like in their 40s or 50s, not like the contemporary generation. But my point is just that like she put it in here because it's like totally fucking normal thing for lesbians to call gay men fags, and I think basically the Curtis Tripp thing is like he wants attention and control, and he knows that people don't want to be perceived as homophobic. So it's like the card he keeps playing, even though it's like literally nothing has happened. Okay. The Avengers tracked her down and serenaded her on Valentine's Day. But in that shabby room in the center, we did more birthing than planning. Sorry, more bitching than planning. I ranted with the best of them. That homophobe Giuliani, that racist. Anna and I were practically living together by then. The word love had been mentioned, but we weren't counting our chickens. Weird. How long have they been together? It's really hard to tell. Oh, hey, Maple, long time no see. It's really hard to tell how long they've been together, but anyway, whatever. What could be more unlikely than a dyke from Cuba, another from Kentucky? Though I joke sometimes, we were both Southerners after all, both born below the Mason-Dixie line. One day, after a meeting full of more Giuliani phobia, she started wondering aloud why none of the Avengers ever asked how New York ended up with a guy in the first place. Plenty of black and Hispanic with the guy in the first place. Plenty of black and Hispanic voters pulled the lever for him. Others didn't bother to vote. Maybe it had something to do with the corrupt democratic machine, or their perpetual fear of taking on problems like crime, especially in minority neighborhoods. Were they afraid of getting called racist? Or was it because they preferred to see people of color always as and only as victims, as clients of the Democratic Party and never agents of their own lives? She was fed up with white people defending drug dealers just because they were Hispanic, as if that made a difference. It was a disaster, the whole lefty tendency to make a cult of the victims of bigotry, exempting them from normal rules, keeping them not quite adult, not fully responsible, still not equal. The next time I launched into an Auntie Giuliani diatribe, I heard the sound of my own smug voice and started to wonder what was behind it. A privilege I didn't know I had, a self indulgence. I think it was around then that the Avengers got a call from the Montel Williams show, and imagining it was cool to be on national TV, a bunch of us piled it into the limo they sent and made spectacles of ourselves. Most of us were on stage. I ceded my place to Chanel because she looked way better than me in her shades, and we needed a little diversity. Several years later, Anna and I were in a hotel room somewhere, Kentucky maybe, flipping through the cable, and I screamed, "Oh my god, look at that!" "What, is that you?" "Turn it off, turn it off." There I was, that worked up dyke in the audience, that peculiar self, that ranting activist whom Anna knew and loved anyway. Okay, this is a thing I think we can look up. Dragon, I think maybe your notifications on your phone are turned off. Do you get other YouTube notifications? Because, like, last time on my last stream, uh, all of the women in the live chat said they got a notification for it. So I think maybe there's like a couple individual women who like the settings on their phone or something like that. Something going on with that. It's nothing to do with me, I think. Um, well, I'm trying to figure out what year this happened in. This must be the wrong episode. Okay, well, sometime in the 90s. Um, yeah, I tried to look it up, but there apparently he's had multiple lesbians on his show, so it's hard to find out which episode it is that they went on. Okay, well, we're sometime in the 90s. Okay. On St. Patty's Day, I crawled out of Anna's bed and met up with Sindra and Boy Kelly to take the train up to Midtown. It was nice and sunny, but the crowd of queers was still smaller than the year before. ILGO, which is the Irish lesbian and gay organization, I think, was suffering from the activist curse of internal disputes that would soon strike the Avengers, and the rest of the community was already tired of fighting to be included in the cheesy het parade, even if other minority queers like South Asians and Poles were in trying to get into their own. Al Sharpton was there, though, with his rock star hair and retinue, courting the gay vote for the next mayoral election. There were also a few queers notable, like Tom Duane, Tony Kushner, and the up and coming Christine Quinn. The church ladies for choice serenaded us with the old standard God is a lesbian, which was perfect, considering that the city's excuse to exclude us that year wasn't our personal safety, but the beer swigging, step dancing, baton twirling St. Patty's Day parade was religious in nature, so organizations could ban whoever they wished. Allison's is probably sometime around 93, 94. Yeah, no, but it must be later, right? Because the Lesbian Avengers only like took off in 92, and it's been at least 2 years, right? Like, I think it might actually I'm not sure if it's like 94 or 95 at this point, but 102 got arrested that year after shouting, "We're Irish, we're queer, we'll be here every year." Increasingly, it looked as if we'd have to be. New Yorkers showed no signs of rising up to protest how stupid it was to define the beer swigging, step dancing parade as religious, especially when queers were marching in parades all over Ireland. So nobody had to protest. So somebody had to protest. Somebody had to stand on their rights. Even if the parade was idiotic, even if you didn't really want to go, somebody had to remember who the streets belonged to, especially when they were being tidied up. All the squeegee men gone, the homeless not housed but shoved out of sight, the parks closed, and the music dimmed. It was so depressing. It must have been a dream. Lesbians on the cover of magazines, 20,000 dykes in the streets in DC. It all suddenly seemed like a hopeless fight. But so what? I told myself. What does it cost you to pretend that the world can change for the better? That his That history is an arc and it bends towards justice, even if it is long. Oh, yo, we can look up what year Giuliani got fucking elected. Okay, thank you, Allison. Allison says Giuliani was elected in 94, so probably 95 or so. Yeah, yeah, okay. That's horrible, Dragon. I'm so sorry. Whenever somebody tells me they have trouble sleeping, I instinctually want to start recommending things, but you're like an adult. I'm sure you've tried your own things. Oh, actually, one thing that I recommend that people sometimes haven't heard of, if you look up, there's like this magnesium powder. I don't know, like if your issue is that you're too anxious to sleep, you might not do anything. Not oh, natural factors, that's the one. I don't use this anymore because I used to use it, but I found like I don't know why. Now when I use it, I wake up and all my muscles feel like sore. Um, but if you go into Google and type natural factors magnesium sleep, there's like this stuff. It's like a drink mix. It's like a powder, and when you drink it, it like makes all your muscles. Oh, you know already. Never mind. Makes all your muscles relax. Makes it easier to fall asleep. Okay. I don't like the Calm brand though. I feel like the Natural Factors brand is like better. It's like higher quality, but I mean it's like the same concept. Okay. Chapter 15. Yeah, I should have just kept my mouth closed. You knew. Is it called Calm? That's one brand of it, but you can get the same thing from different brands. Like magnesium powder for sleeping. Okay. A few weeks later, I was back on Fifth Avenue, this time with a genuine smile on my face, a silly hat on my head, and an over the top little black frock I borrowed from Anna, and a leather jacket I ripped off at a fancy out magazine party that I decided was such a repulsive display of queer money it couldn't pass undisturbed. I was at the tail end of my Jean Jeanette phase that included appropriating Ren's book Journal du Voleur, The Thief's Journal, which gave me a lot of satisfaction when we found out that Ren's wasn't his real name. Neither was the moniker Sontag that he gave to Ingrid Roatel when she worked at her eponymous restaurant or any of the other aliases we'd seen on his fistful of credit cards. Later on, though, I felt guilty about the jacket, mostly because it turned out to be from Sears, so probably the guy I stole it from wasn't much better off than me. When my experiment in class warfare was over, shame kicked in and I gave it away. But back to Fifth Avenue. That time, we were there for the Easter parade, the only day of the year New York's women engaged in extravagant frivolity, putting parrots on their heads, or whole flower gardens, erupting into kitsch. They reminded me of those old fashioned drag queens who would throw on girly frocks, high heels, and wig, but leave beard stubble or a mustache on their face so you'd know they were just how. So, what? So you'd know they knew just how mostly artificial gender was. When do you get to be an adult, Ben? I don't know what that means. Um, Also, like, okay, this isn't even like so I work super early in the morning and like for me, the biggest thing that's helped me sleep really well is literally just like being forced to wake up early. Like if you do that every single day and you're working a lot, like you're tired. So that has been a big help for me. But not that that's like what you should all do. But also, so I have like a thing that like a ritual for when I go to sleep, which I know it's like sleep hygiene. Like it's like annoying for somebody to like tell you what to do with you sleep. But like I crank up the heat in my room like an hour before I want to go to sleep, and then I like turn it back off or to normal or whatever. So I want my room to be really, really hot. I feel like it's way easier to fall asleep when you're like toasted. Um, And also have like scented candles that again I like light them like 30 minutes before I want to go to sleep. So it's like in my brain, I think I've like trained myself like this is what happens. So if I need to go to sleep at like 9 p.m., if I start doing this at 8, I can make it happen. I don't know. Um the heat thing though, I nobody's ever told me like recommended that to me and I've noticed like a huge difference with it. Like if you're like sweating your ass off, it's way easier to fall asleep. Okay. Okay. Won't work for someone in menopause, Benji. You are so right, Dragon. I'd very much I am alive here. I apologize, Dragon. Never mind. Maybe it will help Maple if she's not in menopause. Okay. Right. Okay. Um I love how well I don't love. I mean that like sarcastically. How she is like, "Oh, yo, you know like when women are like being extravagant and frivolity and whatever, that's the same as drag queens." It's so misogynistic. Um yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, and yeah, she's like, drag queens know the gender is artificial. And I'm like, yes and no. Like, they think it's a game, but only because they have so much masculinity. I don't even mean in the terms of like what you can see. I mean, in terms of like psychology and behavior. Um, anyway, whatever. Okay. We waded into that, Anna and me, Chanel, two Michelles, the architect Rebecca, who did the hat consults, and a frankly Italian photographer, Miriam, who took a picture of me as Atlas holding up the giant globes at the Rockefeller Center while people spun around the ice rink. Women in the crowd smiled at us almost uniformly when we gave them delicate Avengers eggs that Rebecca had emptied out and decorated with little painted bombs and bits of nylon ribbon you wrap packages in. They were real works of art, those eggs. Anna and I saved one carefully wrapped with tissue paper. You can't always go out there with your fist raised. Half the Avengers were from International Action, a group I'd started at the Avengers to work on the international front. Sorry, half these Avengers. Okay. I was finally using my own brain, or at least my gut. I figured that if the Avengers chapters had started to pop up all over the place, and if we were sending people across the country as reinforcements, and NAFTA was getting signed and the EU was taking wing, that the Avengers should start to think in global terms, especially since it was in New York that the UN convened and, cons- and consulates were housed. And if New York was handy for national media outlets to call attention to murders in Oregon, it was just as good to publicize how dykes were killed in Armenia or institutionalized and tortured with electroshock in China or Cuba. Even Rudolph Giuliani declared in his inaugural speech that he wanted to make New York the capital of the world once again. I figured it was time to plant our own country's flag, and like the Village Voice writer Jill Johnston, to declare our own Dyke Nation. Interactions, first action. Okay, so if anybody is confused, as far as I understand it, I mean, I'm guessing there's like the lesbian Avengers, and then they have like groups within that who do different things. Mhm. She's briefly kind of mentioned this in some of the past chapters, but she hasn't really gone into it. So, interaction is not like a new group. They are just like like a department within the lesbian Avengers. Okay. Interaction's first action was ambitious, expensive, and relied on drag. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say they're relying on drag queens, not drag kings. Like it's pretty disappointing to me how the lesbian Avengers, I mean, as far as this book tells it, didn't really center women that much. Anyway, On April 30th, 1994, 5 or 6 of us slung on our best girl clothes, like skirts and blouses and dresses and shoes that weren't made of canvas and didn't have holes. Then we took a cab to the UN headquarters where they were holding a black tie dinner for UNIFEM, the United Nations Development Fund for Women. There was no way we were going to be able to muscle our way in, so we'd bought hugely expensive tickets and crammed propaganda into our pantyhose. The security guys went through our purses and grabbed the pamphlets there, but didn't search anywhere else. We felt very clever as we climbed into the elevator. Upstairs, in what looked like a made over conference room, were elegant women in sequins and silks, saris, and other kinds of fancy dress, accompanied mostly by men in tuxedos and smoking jackets. Um, this is very reminiscent of like a lot of the stuff that the GLF did, the Gay Liberation Front, and the Gay Activist Alliance did in the 70s. Um, this is kind of what you would call a zap. So you go into um, a situation where there's a huge potential for attention from important people and media, and you like go undercover so everybody thinks you're normal, and then once you're inside and you like captured their attention, right? So everybody paid to come into this event, now they're inside the event, right? And it's like presumably there's media there. Then you do your crazy shit. Like Gay Activist Alliance, I can't remember like specific ones. Well, okay, I can remember two specific ones. One of them was like I think it was like a mayoral race in New York or something. Something to do with politics. But they went in and they like paid for normal seats and whatever. And then they chained themselves to the chairs and started like they like chanting or something. Another time, I mean, this is like anyway. My point is just this is like a normal thing in gay history. Okay, I would love to do events like this, but like I will not do them alone. I need some women to go with me. Okay, upstairs. Okay, but she says we felt very clever. To me, this is like a sign of impending doom that this is the like tone she's using. Okay. Upstairs, in what looked like a made over conference room, were elegant women in. Oh, wait, we already read this. Okay. The women chefs preparing dinner were all big deals, especially the one who did those outrageous sculptures with chocolate. There were also puff pastry things. I was sorry we were going to miss the grub and considered, just for a minute, forgetting the protest to stay there and stuff myself, but I didn't. We were Avengers, after all, with a mission inspired by all those hundreds of pages of literature that UNIFEM put out without using the word lesbian once. Because the primary concerns of all women were birth control, violent husbands, and economic independence, and there wasn't this other category of female that, on top of all that, also had to deal with being considered criminals or sinners or sick, raped, quote unquote, correctively, or killed. No, they thought the solution to the problems of all the world's women was to teach them how to raise poultry. Our response: you can't raise chickens in jail. Pretty hard to disagree with that. Big fan of Nettles here. You're talking. Oh, you're talking. Okay, whatever. Thought you were talking to me. I was like, what? No, you're talking. Um, right. The plan was pretty simple. Just making a quick speech at some point, speaking aloud the word we'd redacted out of their global vision. Sorry, the word they'd redacted out of the global vision, and reminding them we existed. 10 fingers, 10 toes, with our own urgent concerns. We sipped ice water for a couple minutes and tried not to make eye contact. And when one of the elegant, bejeweled women took the mic and welcomed everybody, we exchanged looks, took a deep breath, and stood up. Sorry. Shit. Okay, I think I have to end the stream. Someone is trying to do like virtual work in my house and they can't because the internet isn't letting them do it. Okay. Okay, this sucks. So, we are like halfway through chapter 15. Um So I'm gonna sign off for now. Actually, you know what? Give me 1 second. Like, because I started the stream on my what's my bill period with my data. I'm wondering if I can stream through my phone, but like I'm on my laptop. Okay. Actually, just give me 1 second. 1 second. Okay, I don't have to finish streaming. It's fine now, apparently. Okay. Now I'm kind of out of breath. It's actually really good luck this hasn't happened before. Okay. Sorry, I'm just like giving myself a second to catch my breath. If I start reading like this, it'll take me way longer to catch my breath. And it'll be like more frustrating for you listening to me. Okay. My latte looks good. It's literally, this is my drink. Like every time I go to Starbucks. My drink is an iced chai with oat milk with a little bit of vanilla. Not the full amount because it's way too sweet. Like 2 or 3 pumps of vanilla. And then the vanilla sweet cream cold foam. It doesn't have to be there, but it's nice. Okay. Okay. Okay, so some lady stood up and took the mic. You love chai? Yes. Also, if you get a chai and you get their ginger molasses cookie at the same time, it's like amazing. Like the ginger molasses cookie goes so well with the chai. It's like perfect. Um, okay. Okay, so some fancy lady at this uni Femme, the United Nations Development Fund for Women thing, stood up and you know, was gonna start whatever, talking about things with the mic. And all the lesbian Avengers stood up. Okay. The good thing about this sort of event is that no one ever expects an interruption. The women at the podium just stood there in shock as Michelle Kronk, a blonde massage student, approached and very politely said, "Excuse me, I'd like to say a few words." The woman stepped away from the mic, and Michelle read our list of demands. Nothing outlandish. Just for Uniform Femme to include lesbians in their basic calculations. Like when they talked about violence against women, they acknowledged the double risk for dykes. While Michelle talked calmly and eloquently, the rest of us went around the room and began to hand out pamphlets. A few of the stuffed shirts and fancy dressed guests refused, outraged that their nice self congratulatory supper had been interrupted by the dykes. The rest took them out of politeness or curiosity, even asked a few questions. Then security arrived and all hell broke loose. They were total stormtroopers, 6.5 feet of muscle that picked us up like puppies by the scruffs of our necks and dragged us out. They tried to cover our mouths as we shouted, "Women won't thrive until lesbians survive," or something like that. What I remember most was lying face down on the scratchy carpet near the elevators with a beefy guard's knee on my neck and my hands behind my back, while a small Mary Lametta jumped on the guy and shouted, get off her," which he eventually did, but not before I had to bear the weight of two of them and wondered just how much my spine could take. They hustled us all downstairs to a basement that looked a lot like a modern kitchen, all gleaming with tile and steel, and took mug shots and demanded ID, which they copied. They had actual cells down there, but they didn't lock us up, though some women came and threatened to turn us over to the 17th Precinct cops who were lurking outside and charge us with a federal offense. Yeah, us, the terrifying and ragtag bunch of revolutionaries who didn't have anything more harmful than a handful of Xerox pamphlets stuffed in our pantyhose. Then, with a little smirk, she tossed out a warning. "Your mugshots will be up near all the entrances, so don't try this again." Then we took the elevators up to the surface, where they released us like animals into the wild, and we joined the nearby demonstrators, who cheered when we appeared and demanded the news. Hey, hey, ho, ho, dykes are women, too, you know? And right away, Sarah Schulman came over and busted my balls. "We were worried. You were inside a long time. What if they'd kept you? You haven't made any provisions for someone to communicate. You were totally irresponsible. No exit strategy, no legal backup. The whole thing was shit." She was right, of course. On the other hand, it wasn't exactly the Bay of Pigs. "Chill out," I said. "Everything was fine. You should have seen Mary jump on the security guard's back and try to get him off me. She's a hero. And Michelle Kronk was so calm up there with the mic. We had a real impact. Or so I hoped. We didn't get any media coverage at all, but we'd spoken a forbidden word into the silence. Lesbian, lesbian, lesbian. And we could do our own PR where it counted, too, among queers. What does that mean? We could do our own PR where it counted among queers? But the queers don't have any power, so what's the point of doing PR to them? That doesn't make any sense to me. While my organizing skills may have stunk compared to the other super efficient Avengers, even Anna agreed I should have had a better exit strategy. I wasn't wrong about the timing. Queers from all over the world flooded the city during the Stonewall anniversary, and we met a bunch of them at a conference put on by the International Lesbian and Gay Human Rights Campaign. Is that what the HRC is now? Like they used to be this, and they took the lesbian and gay out of it because it was like not inclusionary or not inclusive enough or something, right? All we had to do was set up our table, and these girls would see the name there, Lesbian Avengers or Vengadoras Lesbianas, and they'd rush over to take the pamphlets, sign up on the mailing list, and beg to hear what we'd already done. They oohed and awed when we described how we invaded the Unifem banquet. Like US Dikes, they were sick of asking politely for the rights, like eternal beggars. Wait, what? How are these non-Americans? I don't understand. The city was flooded during the Stonewall anniversary. There was a conference put on. Oh, okay. So I really, she's so fucking, it's annoying. She doesn't really describe things properly. Okay, so I guess tons of international women, um, or LGBT, like gay people. HRC never had the LGB or T in it. It's intentionally more palatable to the mainstream. Thank you, Allison. Okay, well, whatever. Um, the US Dikes, they were sick of asking politely for their rights. Sorry, like US Dikes, they were sick of asking politely for their rights like eternal beggars. You want to feel powerful? There's no better way than going out there and demanding stuff. Toot sweet, right now. They were ready to be heroes, or at least party with them. Dozens accepted the invitation to the Avengers fundraiser at Anna's. We thought it would be a little cocktail party, but a good 70 or 80 dykes came, mobbing the place and sucking down our liquor as fast as we could, demanding as fast as they could, demanding more and louder music. Something you could dance to. You got salsa, and girls made out in the corners and twirled each other around, barely pausing when Anna's downstairs neighbor came up and knocked on the door, announcing she had to work the next day and if we could maybe keep it down a little bit. Too bad, darling. We were celebrating a revolution. Shouting over the music, the handful of Avengers who bothered to attend tried to collect addresses and pitch the Dyke March coming up on Sunday. We were competing with the gay games, and when we pressed them, people were nervous. A Dyke March? You're sure there won't be arrests? Haven't been so far? And they said they'd think about it, fetched another rum or scotch or beer, then spun each other around some more. Okay, so she's basically saying they're all talk and no follow through. Oh, hey, Bird, kill me. Anna says it sound, or sorry, Maple says it sounds like a good party. I mean, the fact that it's all lesbian sounds good to me, but I actually don't like loud music and drunk people. When we ran out of ice, I made a run to Roger's Deli over on First Avenue. It was a great relief to get out of there, with all those voices, all those demands, though a couple of Latin American dykes came with me. They thought our lives were strange and asked about how we did things, even why we had to go out for ice. They were from different countries and argued about whether Anna and I were rich or poor. The apartment is big. No, it's small. There's nothing in it. There are paintings. They talked like I wasn't there at all, until they asked if I was a typical American, and I said I didn't know. It's a big country, lots of people. I don't know them all. And they thought that was hilarious, and I was incredibly witty, and complimented me on my Spanish like everyone did, as if Americans were such barbarians that knowing even a few words redeemed you. The party seemed like it would never end. Then suddenly, um, a few decided they wanted to go to a real lesbian club. Word spread, and then, like a plague of locusts, they departed the ravaged field, leaving little shed skins and empty cups behind. You could hear them buzzing in the street, their voices fading. What energy! So much it scared me. Imagine if we recognized it ourselves, if it could have been harvested. The only peculiar thing was that a few people asked us if we did our actions topless, like the one at the elementary school, with children. No? Are you kidding? Who told you that? But nobody could ever say. Chapter 16. I'm actually getting through this pretty fast. I think that this section, we're in section 2 now. I think section 2 ends at chapter 21. I'm going to try to make it to the end of section 2 today. We'll see. Okay. Maple says I've never been to a lesbian party, but it sounds like the kind of party I'd actually enjoy. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I talked to some older lesbian, well, like in their 30s and 40s lesbians from Toronto, and when they talk about like lesbian house parties, they were like 1 degree of separation between that and an orgy, and like everybody was drunk, and it was all like dyke drama of like, oh, you can't sleep with her, like she's my ex, and like you're my friend, and like all this bullshit. So it actually, when I talked to these women about what it was like when dykes actually like had their own parties and spaces, like they made their own spaces to be with each other. It actually sounds kind of like nerve wracking. Okay. All right. But like, I would still go to like find the lesbians. Okay, we were calling it the International Dyke March and figured it would be big, but how big? Pride Week that year was marking the 25th anniversary of the Stonewall riots, when the queers at the Stonewall Inn in the village refused to submit to one more night of beatings and arrests and threw themselves a riot, which bloomed unexpectedly into a full-fledged liberation movement. Celebrating it, the city embraced us, at least temporarily. Couples that usually kept themselves at arm's length walked the street holding hands. Gay-friendly stores flew rainbow flags. We filled hotels with fancy dress balls, and trashy private parties overflowed onto fire escapes, where no one cared that the only thing holding it up in the air were a few pieces of rusty metal that had already started to separate from the brick. We were already so unlikely, never meant to survive, as Audre Lorde said. So we swapped spit on the street corners, in trains, waiting for restaurants, just like annoying straights. While even we could see the benefits of incremental progress and long term thinking, the official events still seemed just a little too full of lobbyists in suits and ties. A little too self congratulatory, as long as Christian extremists still portrayed us as monsters and gay men died by the tens of thousands as Americans muttered, good riddance. It was still too early for polite politics. At the International Dyke March in New York, the Avengers called a lesbian to incite the riot. Incite the riots like capitalized, so no, Maple, I'm the same. Like, I think the last Dyke bar was okay. Dragon, you tell me. Wasn't the last Dyke bar open in Toronto Slacks? And I think it closed like my second year of university when I wasn't living in Toronto. And like that's when I had like become an adult and come out as a lesbian. So like by the time I realized I was a lesbian, I don't think there was any dyke bars left in Canada. um I think it was Slacks. And now when I ask what? Allison, tell us everything. Allison said, I went to some Avengers parties back in the day. I never officially joined because I think I was afraid of the fire eating. And she puts like a tongue out face. For that reason, I wasn't embroiled in the drama. Yeah, well, to be honest, it's kind of dyke shit. It's like every time you get involved in anything, you're risking drama. But that's so cool, though. Can you just tell us where that was? Are you a New Yorker? Just because you knew that thing about Giuliani. Although I guess it's like probably a lot of Americans know that. Did you live in New York in the 90s, I guess? Okay. Okay. It was too early for polite politics. At the International Dyke March in New York, the Avengers called on lesbians to incite the riot. Oh yeah, incite the riot. You're in Boston. Interesting. That's very cool. Um, incite the riot is like in capitals. Okay. As in DC, we handed out thousands of palm cards and a new manifesto, Out Against the Right, written by the newly christened Lesbian Avenger Civil Rights Organizing Project, La Crop. In it, we proclaimed that, quote, butch, femme, and androgynous dykes, leather queers, drag kings and queens, transsexuals, and transgenders, it's like dash genders, okay, will not be thrown to the wolves so that straight acting, quote unquote, gay people can beg for acceptance at our expense, end quote. Quote, we have to respond on our terms, not theirs, end quote. Quote, thousands of angry dykes can't be wrong and won't give in, ever, end quote. Dragon says the owner of Slacks gave me the once over as if I were a drag queen. She was a snob. Oh, that sucks. What is it? Did you ever go to the hen house? That was owned by what's her face from the Oregon, right? I don't know. I know that all the dyke clubs that were opened in Toronto like past 2010 were just like black holes of like black pits for money, but like I really wish I could have gone to some at least once. Um Even though we had a screening of the drag queens from Toronto at Slacks. Okay. Allison says I went to college in Ithaca, New York. No way! I've spent like quite a bit of time in Ithaca. It's like such a chill town. It's cute. What's the name of that ice cream place? Whatever. Okay. In Ithaca, New York till 91, so got a lot of NYC news and then moved back to Boston in the late 91 after spending the summer going to women's music fests. Oh my god, Allison, so cool. So you went to Mish Fest then, right? Like Ithaca to Lansing isn't that far. Um is it Lansing? Whatever, Michigan. Um Maple, oh my god, I was obsessed with the organ. Alex, you can ask a question. Uh Maple wants to know who Amy Diaz is. Maple, to be honest with you, I don't really feel like explaining it to you. If you literally type Amy Diaz and Kiwi Farms in, you will find whatever it is that Komotashi was reading. I don't know what this is, but I'm just assuming they've compiled like all of her public bullshits into one thread. So, I actually have to go to the washroom. Alex, ask your question. I'll be back in 1 second. Hello. Um, Yo, it's you, Alex. What's up, Alex? I didn't realize it was like there's many Alexes. I mean, Alex, I don't know. I'm not gonna make any proclamations about intersex things, but like, I know you. I consider you to be a woman. You are like a fucking lesbian, you know? Like, that should be enough. I mean, for me, it's enough. I won't say for anybody else what the situation I don't know. But for me, you're a woman. You're a lesbian. You are very welcome to be here, Alex. Okay. Also, hi, Alex. Have you watched my streams before? Okay. Uh, alrighty. Okay. Where is the thing? Oh, yeah. So, the Lesbians Avenger Civil Rights Organizing Project. They were handing out their new manifesto. Alex, I know you've been through like so much like lesbophobic trauma from like every fucking direction. I don't know how anyone can have any like can want to make it worse. like y- yeah. Oh my god, Allison, really? Allison, is there any lesbian music festivals? Like I know of like one informal group of like radical feminist lesbians in like the Boston-ish area. But do you know of stuff there? Because I will fucking drive to go to that. Like it's not that far from I think it's like 14 hours or something. Like I can do that. Dragon Kiddigan said Slack's hosting a screening of us drag kings on the Maury Povich show in the late 90s before he got his whole who daddy daddy crazy. I don't know what that means, but yeah, I know what you mean. I've heard this about like dyke bars before. Like they'll have drag nights and they will like obviously the dyke bars want the butches there because because lesbians like butches, but then they're like fucking homophobic to them, and so they don't want to be there. Like it's fucking so stupid. Um, Allison says the National Women's Music Festival in Indiana still happens, but I think okay, I would totally be down to go to that. Um, I don't know. Most of the states seems pretty close to me. Like I'm happy to drive pretty far. I also want to go to Ohio Lesbian Fest, but why the fuck is it in October? Like I'm so sorry, Alex. What you've been through is horrific. Like I have nothing but love and sympathy for you and or empathy or whatever. Okay. Thank you very much for your information, Allison. I really appreciate it. Okay. Let's keep moving. It's only been an hour and we've gotten through I can't count. 3 chapters. So it's theoretically possible that we will get through this section. How many more pages? Okay, we're on page 100 and this section ends at 138. Okay, actually that's pretty long, but we'll try. Okay. Allison says if the festivals are like they used to be, they often are held at summer camps in the off season, which could be why the Ohio Fest is in October. Interesting. Holly says, have I missed it all yet? No. Um, Allison, I really appreciate you sharing your experience. Like, there's a lot of older women who are not my generation who show up on the stream to tell us what's up, and I really great. It's really great. Um, okay. Right. Okay. So they have this Lesbian Avenger civil rights organizing project. They're handing out pamphlets and palm cards at the Dyke March. I assume this is like 1995, based on the Rudy Giuliani thing being like a chapter ago. But oh no, this is the 25th anniversary of Stonewall. What's 69 plus 25? I can't do math. Like me literally pulling out my calculator. 94. Okay, it's 1994. Oh, I know. You guys are so sweet. Like, I kind of feel like, I don't know. It's, if it wasn't for you guys, I would just be talking to a camera. Like, you're the ones who are doing cool things. Okay. So they're handing out these things. I'm going to reread the quotes from the things they're handing out. Okay. Butch, femme, and androgynous dykes, leather queers, drag kings and queens, transsexuals, and transgenders will not be thrown to the wolves so that straight acting quote unquote gay people can beg for acceptance at our expense. We have we have to respond on our terms, not theirs. Thousands of angry dykes can't be wrong and won't give in, ever. Okay. I thought the manifesto was great, an important call to action, but its earnest, angry tone also signaled a huge shift in the Avengers' sensibility. I didn't really notice its importance at the time, just recoiled a little when somebody said they were glad to dump the old one. Quote, I was never comfortable with it. It was silly, she said. End quote. Yes, seconded somebody else. I expected something more serious. Wait. Glad to dump the old one. Okay, so their criticisms of the old Lesbian Avengers manifesto. Okay. Um, Several Avengers exchanged knowing nods, and I wondered why they hadn't said anything before. I thought it was so beautiful, so funny, joking. Quote unquote, subversion is our perversion. I felt absolutely mortified. I often did. Like during that discussion over the final, quote unquote, Sally press release. For months, the Ministry of Propaganda, which is like, again, this is like a group within the Lesbian Avengers. It's not like some other group. This is like a department or whatever within the Lesbian Avengers, okay? For months, the Ministry of Propaganda had been working to get coverage for the International Dyke March. Besides doing the usual, they decided to also use teasers featuring a character called Sally. I wrote the copy for the final, thinking of all the dykes I'd been reading about or working with as part of the international group, and wrote Sally wears saris and Doc Martens. Sally speaks all the best languages. Sally says I shouted loudest at Tiananmen Square. When the text was presented at the meeting, I remember expecting kudos for inclusiveness, or at the worst, a criticism that it was an annoyingly poetic laundry list, but somebody said, quote, I'd like to know why there's no images here of African Americans. Did you do it on purpose? End quote. Quote unquote, I'm deeply offended, said somebody else. Then it was open season on my quote unquote insensitivity, with plenty of attacks from young white women burnishing their anti-racist credentials, and afterwards, big gaping silence when I was supposed to fill with a commie style self-criticism or cheap Freudian analysis, confessing, I suppose, an unconscious desire for the erasure of Black America. But I didn't, because I didn't. I kept my mouth shut and my eyes blank in the face of all those death rays until Marlene finally said, I don't think it was intentional. Let's just add a phrase or two. All right, Kelly? End quote. Quote unquote perfect, I said, and cheerfully scribbled down their suggestions, like it was water off a duck's back and my hands weren't shaking. Fucking activists. So she's basically like, I'm open. Like she went there expecting. I don't know. It seems to me like she was open to criticism, but it was like it was bad faith. Like the moment they saw it, um, they were like attacking her basically. Which like okay, I don't have any place to speak on racism specifically, but I think like as general feminist consciousness raising, right? Like I don't know what the correct terminology is, right? But like white women, for example, having like a clearer and deeper understanding of the experience of black women, for example, like this is a process, right? Like what she's describing here is kind of like how the woke people act. Like you show up and you say something and you think that you're being like inclusive or whatever, you're trying to, and instead of them like helping you to have a different understanding or explaining why they think it's like not good or whatever, they immediately just attack you. And it's like, I'm not saying women of color owe white women anything. What I'm saying is like within, especially within the lesbian Avengers, like as we've been like reading the book, right? There's been like some racism stuff that's been brought up. How are the lesbian Avengers supposed to get better at not being racist? Like if this is the kind of, I don't know. Obviously, it's very justified to be angry though. Like it and actually kind of like mind-boggling to me considering okay, when they did like this lesbian freedom ride thing in from New York to Maine, I think 2 years before this, a black feminist collective criticized the lesbian Avengers for being racist, right? And she talked about the effect it had on like the lesbian Avengers, like in New York, like the women of color and the white women, like how it all went down, basically, right? And so to me, it's like really incomprehensible that she went and made this ad and included all these like international references, but like was blind to what was happening in her own backyard, basically. It's like that's how I kind of see it. So to me, it's like incomprehensible what she did, but also I think if you like attack women when they're trying to like not be racist, even if they're failing at it, like, I don't know, how is it supposed to help in the future? Like, I'm just thinking about it like from the perspective of the women of color in the lesbian Avengers. Like, after this event, is this going to precipitate the next type of thing happening going down better or worse when it comes to race? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, okay. I'm not quite sure. I find the way that she brings up race like just really bizarre. I think she's trying to kind of like be nuanced in her position and like this is my experience or whatever, but like I don't know. I just find when she brings up race, I don't quite know what to think about it. The tone, the attitude that she brings it up. Okay, so she's like, fuck the activists because they were mean to her, and she was like so upset she was shaking and she was acting like it was no big deal. Okay, internal squabbles didn't paralyze me yet. There's some foreshadowing. Not when I saw how many dykes were pouring into Bryant Park, dragging their new friends from Brazil or Spain or India or South Africa, and marching even without guarantees of safety. I remember why I put up with that nonsense. After a brief confab with the cops at the beginning, we took Fifth Avenue with an enormous banner, a marching band, and huge inflatable globes bouncing through the crowd. I've seen pictures of this. It's pretty rad. Um right. Our own Irish dykes, Anne Maguire and Marie Honan, were at the front, at least briefly, before the others took their place. There were tons of New Yorkers and international dykes, plus Avengers from all over the states who had come in ambitious caravan that they'd called a pride ride so as not to offend anybody. This is a reference to like I think a reference to the Freedom Ride thing. But to me, it's also like she acknowledged the Freedom Ride thing, like she wasn't for it, and she acknowledged that it was like erasure and whatever. But the way she brings it up here, it's like she's bitter about it. I don't know. It's really weird. Okay. Doing actions along the way, one group set off from Austin, Texas, and took a route that went through KKK country, including Vidor, Texas, and Ovid, Mississippi. I don't know these references. I assume that Americans know this crap. Like I know obviously where Texas and Mississippi are. I don't know about these towns in KKK country. Okay. Another group began in Minneapolis, passed through Lansing, Michigan, and Pittsburgh, and converged with the southern group in Philly. Canadian Avengers turned up too. I love how there's just one little phrase about Canadian Avengers. I'm sure like a fuck tons of Canadians drove to New York. It's so close to us. Like like from Toronto to New York City, I think is a 10-hour drive. Like it's not that far. Okay. At 23rd Street, I climbed a lamppost and looked back. The march was as big as DC, and we filled the avenue like 20,000 dyke ants, waving Avenger signs and homemade poster boards, blowing whistles, shaking noisemakers, bellowing, ripping our shirts off. It was our street, our city. A couple of hours, it was our world. Sorry, for a couple of hours, it was our world. At Washington Square Park, the Avengers gathered around the fountain, displaying banners from all over the country. And after making a short speech and consecrating the moment by eating fire, they joined this cheering crowd, plunging into the water with dogs and backpacks and lovers and best friends. Clown World says I changed my hair. Yes, I do. Kamotashi says I love North Americans. It's so close. It's only a 10-hour drive. I mean, but yeah. That's literally how I view it. Like when I go visit my family, it's a 5-hour drive for me. I wouldn't do that in like one day. I wouldn't drive to and from in one day, although my dad does that because he's nuts. Like it's not an unheard of thing for Canadians to do that, but um, yeah, I don't know. Everything is really spread out. So okay, yeah, I just wanted to say, I don't know. I'm not trying. I don't want to like nitpick. Cloud World says I consider within 2-3 hours to be close. Yeah, like 2-3 hours is like I'll go there, hang out for the day, and come back. Like that seems reasonable to me. Um, okay, so I don't want to nitpick her. She hasn't said at any point in this book. I don't know. Okay, I one of my big things with this book is it's very, very clear that she is writing to a specific audience, which is like fine. But that specific audience is not lesbians and it's not women. It's queer people. So I'm like, how much shit is not in here? Like she never says I'm a radical feminist or I'm a lesbian feminist. Not that I know that she is or anything. Not that I have some kind of inside knowledge that she's hiding this. I'm just saying, like, she she never mentions like anything about feminism to do with the lesbian Avengers, which is like really strange. Um Cave Monster says in the UK people think it's a long drive to go further than an hour. Literally commuting within Toronto can take you more than an hour.